Even cutting your losses can be extremely difficult to learn. Letting your profits run can be 10 times more difficult than learning how to cut your losses. In fact, it's one of the most difficult things to acquire in terms of a skill is learning how to let your profits run. So it was like all this was kind of building up, and my lifestyle was draining my money away. And one of the things
First note already.
One of the things
Part 3. Here we go.
I would say characterized me back then, if I was probably obsessive about anything, it was my credit. It's like my credit was as far as I was concerned, it was like the most important thing in life is to have flawless credit, not just, I mean, flawless. And here I'm in a situation where I am truly running out of money. And my trading losses, it wasn't really like I was losing a lot of money trading because I'd really stopped the hemorrhaging. I wasn't trading in a way where I was actually losing money, but I wasn't making any money.
Happens to a lot of
and it's like,
intermediate traders.
There was always this little voice in the back of my brain.
There's typically
a
long,
come to the forefront of my consciousness
break-even segment in
Mark,
a trader's
this ain't
journey.
adding up. There's something wrong here. There's something wrong. It's like it's not adding up. And then I kind of shove it back there, and like it's going to be all right. I'll figure it out. It's going to be all right. Eventually, it got to the point where I was literally out of money. And the only choice I had was to file bankruptcy. Fortunately, I was in a situation where I had 2 residences, one in Chicago and one in Michigan. And so I had a choice of where I filed. And of course, I filed in Michigan because if Merrill Lynch would have found out, they probably would have fired me. As a matter of fact, nobody knew what had happened. Nobody that I knew in Chicago knew what had happened. So I filed in Michigan, and I'm thinking, literally, because of my attitudes about credit, I'm thinking, if I've got to do this, I'm going to fall beneath the cracks of society and never reemerge. I really believe that. I honestly, God, really did. I just didn't see how it's possible to live after having to do something like that. And of course, what I found is that, and when I ended up, I mean, what I say in The Disciplined Trader, and I don't really go into a lot of detail in The Disciplined Trader about this, but just to say that what I ended up with was really, I had an apartment, I had my bed and my TV, and when I filed, I was still current on everything. I wasn't even late one day on any of my bills. As a matter of fact, I even called the finance company to come and pick the car up. But I wasn't even late a payment. I said, you know what, I can't do it anymore. You're probably going to want it back anyway. So, it was like, come and pick it up. And of course they did. And you guys, there's a funny story about that. I've never told anybody this, but you guys want to hear a funny story about that? When the guy came to pick it up. And so I'm thinking, because we're in front of the apartment building, and I'm thinking, well, if he's going to pick this up, then I ought to get some sort of receipt that it was in perfect condition. Because I don't know what the hell he's going to do to it I don't know. So it's like, and the guy wouldn't give me a receipt saying that. And so I wouldn't give him the keys. And so, so he called his boss, and I heard his boss on the other end of the line screaming at him, "You do whatever he wants to get those keys." Just like, and he said something else I'm not going to say for this particular presentation. But yeah, it was like, they just, someone's willing to give you the car, but they don't even have to go repossess it. It's like, hey, give them the receipt. But in any case, what I realized, now you think about this, it's like when you define yourself based on your possessions. Just like anybody that loses anything, you've got an internal representation and you've got an external representation. And now there was a discrepancy between what was outside of me and what was inside of me in terms of the way that I define myself. And so that has to be reconciled. And what I realized, and it didn't even really take that long. I don't remember how long it took, but it was like, one, I still had my job at Merrill Lynch, and so as a result, it's like I'm starting thinking, okay, well, things are going to be all right. I was in my worst fear. That was my worst fear. When the fear would creep up into the forefront of my mind, I was like, that was my worst fear. Now I'm in it, and I'm realizing that, I think I'm going to be all right. I'm healthy. I can still think. I'm going to be all right. And when I came to this realization that I'm going to be all right, this is when things change for me as a trader. And this is the interesting part about my situation that most people don't have the benefit of experiencing. There are two things. One, I had this foundation of knowing that it was all psychological anyway. So I had all these things that I'd been working on up to that point. And two, when you tap out as a trader, I mean, when you really tap out, you don't get to trade anymore because you don't have any money, right? But I was in a situation where I still got to trade. Even though I was working with other people's money, I still got to trade every day. And so as a result of experiencing my worst fears, coming to the realization that I'm going to be all right, and then at the same time being in a position where I'm able to interact with the market, it was like, because I didn't have anything more to lose, I didn't. It was like this, the market completely changed for me. It was like I had these blinders on that all of a sudden just came off because the market was different, because I wasn't afraid anymore. I was seeing the same patterns over and over and over again beforehand, but I was seeing the same patterns differently. I was seeing the same patterns from a, let's say, relatively carefree state of mind. And that relatively carefree state of mind allowed me to, like say, flow in and out of my trades with an ease and effortlessness that I would not have been able to imagine beforehand. And then what happened is that I started making consistent money for my customers. And there's even,
when he stopped putting extra pressure on himself, I guess he's talking about.
There's one really, as a matter of one really
extrinsic
good
pressure
story
on himself
where,
on his
there are a
trades.
lot of good stories that I can tell you about my customers at Merrill Lynch. But in one case, I inherited this guy who at the time was the head of the state of Illinois' mainframe computers, and he was from India. And he had put together his own trading program, and he was using the state computers to do it. And so, and he had an account, technically an account with Merrill Lynch, but it wasn't funded because he'd lost all his money. But he still maintained the account. And so I inherited him as a customer, and he would call me every day, and he was just like, and all he would say to me is like, I'd pick up the phone. He wouldn't say hi, how are you? He'd say, give me data. Like give me the high, low, and close. And so we interacted like this for a long time. Well, he came up with his own day trading system that eventually, well, because he and I started working on it together. He had the internal program for it, but he didn't have any money management parameters for it. So after
every
about
profitable
2 or 3
trader
months
has
of
a
working with him on it,
system.
we came up with some really good money management parameters.
They don't just
and then
feel
all my customers
like
started trading
feel.
it, and we were making consistent money day after day. Even to the point where Merrill Lynch was starting to take notice. Here all this whole customer, his customer base is making money, and he got to the point where he's thinking, okay, all these people are now deriving this benefit from my work. I should be able to do it too. And he talked his wife into letting him put $5,000 into his account to fund his account. Now, I didn't know what happened to him. Why? I mean, it's not like we had personal discussions, so I don't know why he didn't have any money in his account. The guy was a maniac. It was like he put the money in his account, and 2 days later it was all gone. It was like he'd call me up and he'd say, okay, do this. I said, well, wait a second. The system says to do this. He's like, no. I don't care what the system says. This is what's going to happen. He didn't follow any of his own rules. Now here we had a track record. We had a legitimate track record, bona fide, real money. Day after day.
All you got to do is trade your rules. If you've proven they're profitable.
He gets a few bucks in his account, and it's like he thinks he knows where the market's going. Mm-hmm. Like I said, he was gone in 2 days, and that was it. It was all over with, because at that point, he was done. I didn't get the system because it was in his mainframe computer at the state of Illinois, and had no more contact with him. And shortly after that, ended up getting fired from Merrill Lynch anyway, because there was one of these management consultants that came in from New York, and she was going around the office talking to all the different brokers because of whatever it was that they were trying to find out. And she got to me, and by that time I was already writing The Disciplined Trader. And so, and I
he was
just
writing
like,
the
you
book
know, I
while he
started
worked there.
very exciting to say, oh yeah, this is what I found out and this is what I've learned. And her eyes lit up saying, this is exactly what we're looking for. And she was just, we talked for probably about an hour, hour and a half, and she was all excited. And then she said, I got to go tell, well, I'm not going to say his name, the office manager, okay? And she walked away from me, walked over to the office manager. 10 minutes later, he came over and said, pack up your stuff and get out. Right then and there on the spot.
Well, they probably don't
Pack
want
up
you
your stuff
writing
and
about
get
what's
out.
going on in there. Probably shouldn't be talking about it.
So that's how I ended up actually being a trading coach, because by then, floor trade, because I'd made friends with floor traders. I was making friends to find out how they trade and that sort of thing. Well, they started coming to me for advice, even while I was at Merrill Lynch. And because it's a pretty small community, the word gets around, especially when people are really genuinely helped with the kind of advice that you're giving them. And I'd help several floor traders turn their trading around. And so what had happened is I started getting hired by clearing firms. What I mean by clearing firms is that to trade on the floor of an exchange, you have to clear your trades through a financial institution. And so, it's like these are traders just like you. They have their own account, but what they have to do is they have to clear their trades through, like I said, one of the major clearing firms at the exchange. Well, what would happen is this, that it isn't like this now, but back in the early 80s, or the mid 80s, clearing firms were in some ways like almost like family operations, where the people who owned the clearing firms, they knew all the floor traders, they were friends with them, they partied together.
Really talking a lot about his own
Christmases
story,
and holidays
which
and that
is
sort of
fine,
thing.
but
And so if one of the floor traders
I'm a little bit
would
ready
go
to get
debit,
into some more meats.
you know what I mean by go
here.
debit? In other words, you have to have a positive balance in your account. Well, the problem with floor trading is that not today, but back then, when you traded on the floor, you had to record your trades on a trading card. So in other words, if you and I are entering into a trade where I'm going long and you're going short, what I would do is that we would take our badge, like the acronym of our badge, and our clearinghouse number, record it on this card, and how many contracts we traded. Let's say you're short 10 and I'm long 10, and the price that we traded them at. Well, those cards didn't have to be turned in until the end of the day. And then they'd all get reconciled, meaning that between all the different trades and all the traders from all the different clearing firms, this would all go into a central clearing operation to find out which trades were, to find out who's long and who's short, how much money's coming out of whose account, and whether or not they were called what are called out trades, meaning that you thought I said 10, and I thought we were doing it for 100. Okay, so now we've got a discrepancy of 90 trades. These were called out trades that had to be reconciled before the open of the next day, which is a whole nother world. We're not going to get into it. But all I'm saying is that it would not be unusual for guys to overtrade during the day, and the clearing firm wouldn't even find out about it until the end of the day. For an example, one of the guys I worked with at Merrill Lynch, eventually he was a mathematics professor. He's a really nice guy. Should not have been a trader at all. Had absolutely, anyway, with peas at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and he was a one-lot trader, meaning just traded one contract, one in and out, one contract, and eventually the forces inside of him were building up where he's frustrated with the fact that he can't make a living at it. He's just eking it out. Where one day he snapped, and this one-lot trader almost took down the clearing firm. In other words, he's got like several thousand S&Ps on. Several thousand contracts where other guys are into those trades, and the market's going against them. So he almost took down a clearing firm just by himself. So what would happen is that because
that includes bankroll management too.
Guys would go debit,
bankroll management rules,
meaning they end up the day lost. Maybe they're down $25,000 or $50,000 or $100,000. The guy that owns the clearing firm doesn't want to say, "Hey, you can't trade until you pay this off." They'd want to let them to go back into the pit to work it down. Well, after you got 4 or 5 of these troublesome, or 15 of these troublesome traders that are constantly running debits, you start to get a little worried. And so what they did is they hired me to work with these guys. most of the information, most of the insight, let's say, that you'll find in the disciplined trader and trading in the zone came from me working with these floor traders on a daily basis. And I'm laughing because obviously it was quite a trip working with these guys, because they are not like you and me. that's really about the best way I can describe it without going into a lot of detail. They're not like you and me. So anyway, this is kind of maybe a long drawn out introduction to the fact that what we're talking about here is that you guys have a really wonderful trading methodology where there is an enormous amount of potential for you to be able to make a consistent income from being able to take full advantage of the potential that this trading methodology offers you. But I would say that there's probably, it wouldn't be unfair for me to say that there's probably what I'm going to call the profit gap. The gap between the potential and your bottom line results. This is the potential, and this is your bottom line results. Most people think that when they realize that this gap exists, that somehow learning more about the markets is what's going to fill it.
That was me when my strategy was working really well. My strategy made $9,000
and what you're
in a month,
here
and
today to learn.
I made like
$2,000.
$2,000.
Categorically not the case.
Because I would stop taking trades when I got up a little bit. That was my profit gap.
You have to learn more about yourself.
That's why when a normal drawdown came, it affected me a lot more because I didn't take
your
advantage of
trading
the green
platform
trades
and the
enough.
market to be able to fill this gap. There are psychological skills involved. And then when I talk about psychological skills,
I know that happened to me. I know it did.
Do anybody think of an example of a psychological skill? This is difficult. I don't think, I'm not saying that you should have the answer, but can you think of an analogy in maybe in other parts of the way we express ourselves that you can think of what would be an example of a psychological skill?
Anger management.
Anger management? Okay, good. Anybody else? Okay. What about a situation, and anybody watch Wimbledon here lately? Just it was on?
Wimbledon
I'm
was
not
just
a big
on
tennis fan, but I just happened to be
here
watching
now
it.
too?
And because I knew that I was doing this workshop here, this is something that really sticks in my mind. What's the difference between let's say, here, this is even a better example. What's the difference between a pro basketball player who can stand at the free throw line and hit 20 in a row, even 30 in a row, where the thing about the variables are fixed. The line and the basket and the distances, they're all fixed. And they've got the motor skills to be able to hit, like I said, 10, 15, 20 in a row, but they get into a situation where there's 1 second left and the score is tied and this basket is going to win the game, and he chokes. That's a cycle. The guy that doesn't choke has a psychological skill that the other one doesn't. Trading without fear is a psychological skill.
They don't make all their free throws.
It is a skill that the
But
professionals
I get what you're saying there,
have
Mark.
acquired,
Sure.
and that they have evolved beyond the typical mindset or the kind of mindset that the typical trader operates out of. So when we're talking about trading or thinking like a pro, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that you will evolve beyond the typical mindset so that you can take full advantage. If this line represents potential, that you can take the potential of your...
I like that statement. You will evolve around the typical mindset. I try to explain this a lot. I don't really think it comes off well because the typical mindset is what most people have. But like in his book, one of his largest statements that stood out from his book, Trading in the Zone, is that profitable traders see the world differently. Like you really do start to just think and see the markets, and not even just the markets.
Because
a
it
lot
has
of
to do
things
with your state of mind.
differently when you get to the mindset of being a professional trader, a profitable trader.
In this section.
Okay, I think that's the end of part 1, so that's actually a perfect place to end. This is like a 4 CD seminar or whatever. So we'll go ahead and end our part 3 here. It's going to wrap up the first disc, I think, of this kind of DVD set that we are on here. So the notes from today: learning to let your profits run is more difficult than cutting losses. Only trade your proven rules, stick to your bankroll management, and you will evolve beyond the typical mindset when you become profitable. Those are the rules, or those are the notes from today, from part 3. I will be back tomorrow with part 4 as we start the second CD of this seminar. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the videos, and you all have a good night.